achievement, that's the way it's always been. We rise up to the challenge, we give the game our all. With sheer determination, we go in for the ball. With the crowd thunders, go Cats, we break the banner down. We know the play.
Hi everybody, welcome to the BigFooty Cats podcast. We're up to episode 4 for season 2016. My name is Willo, and tonight I'm joined by two very special guests, two card-carrying members of the Cult of Robbo. I have a couple of regulars or former regulars from the previous version of the podcast as well. SJ, welcome.
Thank you, Willo. I greet you with the flick of the wrist.
and the laugh of the other person on the line is, of course, the Jester. Welcome, Jester.
G'day, guys. G'day, everyone. I haven't caught up on what is the Great One's sermon after Essendon's disappointing Anzac Day performance. How did he shape up? How did he look last night?
Disappointed. It's just on Monday. There was a bit of anger there. And I thank you both for taking valuable time out of your 360 viewing schedule and dedicating your time to Robbo to give us a bit of your time to have a chat tonight. Since I last had a podcast, you two weren't on it, so I can't say since we last spoke. But since we last had a show, we've had 3 games. Comfortable win against Brisbane, which probably should have been higher if we kicked straight. A frustrating win against Essendon, which should have been higher if we'd kicked straight. And probably, for 3 quarters, a reasonably satisfying win against Port on the weekend, although they might not be much chop either. So, gentlemen, what's our take been on the most recent game, if you want to touch on the last 3, but the weekend in particular against Port, SJ?
Yeah, people always criticise me for being cynical or I it is realistic, but I'm not quite sure where the Cats sit, and I think it's pretty hard to get a good form line at the moment on the first 5 weeks. Obviously, we came into the season with quite a few good question marks around new acquisitions of the team, how they're all going to fit together, it's going to take to gel. But although we've 4-1, which is a pretty good result, and you'll take that most weeks, I feel as though the form has been quite patchy, and also our opposition, well, particularly in the last 3 weeks, hasn't been much. So it's hard to read a lot into that when you're playing teams in the bottom third of the ladder. So for me, it's difficult to read exactly where the Cats sit. I'm not sure if they're a 4-1 top 4 team, or if they're a 4-1, sliding towards the bottom of the 8 team. And we'll punish the bottom teams enough, but may not be able to be there when the whips are cracking at the top end. What do you think, Jester?
Yeah, I probably agree with that, mate. I think, I guess the Debbie Downer perspective, which I sort of walked away with a bit was, or certainly had the next morning was, Port. Yeah, I don't think Port are a very good side. It's sort of been pointed out, we still see them as this juggernaut based on a pretty limited run of form a couple of years ago, and since then they just haven't actually been that good. And watching Darry Joe's, if I've said right, his excellent, gold highlight package on YouTube at work the other day, I just thought it was really noticeable in that how sort of demoralised the Port players looked, and they're yelling at each other, or they're pulling out of contests, or they're just making really dumb mistakes. So yeah, I wonder if it isn't actually that much of an achievement to beat them in Adelaide at the moment. But having said that, it's really nice to appreciate a good win just on its own terms for that week. They went the knuckle, and their bloody stupid president gobbing off, and their stupid song and their stupid oval, and Brian Taylor having through his
yelling at the top of his lungs.
Yeah. Just I greatly appreciate this Geelong. Well, I was at the in-laws the first quarter, and I then couldn't figure out how to turn on their complicated audio system, so I didn't have to listen to BT, but got to watch the last 3 quarters. So no, I really enjoyed the win, but yeah, I'm a bit I'm a little bit pessimistic about where we sit. I think probably the bottom half of the 8 is where we'll end up.
I do think, though, that I think we must give due respect for that win, though, because to be 4 goals down, 5-1 against Port over there, quarter time. To be honest, I thought we were sort of bullied in the first quarter. Their pressure was really good. After that, though, I thought the leadership from the two guns in the middle and the rest of the team following was excellent. And you can say, oh, you're playing against maybe a team that's going to finish in the bottom half of the ladder. However, other teams lose in that situation when they're 4 goals down at quarter time away from home. So I did think it was our best win for the year. Not so much because we beat a team that is struggling, but because we beat a team that was 4 goals up from us interstate with a rabid crowd, etc., and we beat them comfortably after that point. And I think that's something to really respect, and hopefully it's a sign of things to come as well.
Obviously, I watched that game with my father-in-law, future father-in-law, was over, and he is a mad Crows fan, so hates Port Adelaide, but knows them very well and has seen a lot of them. And at quarter time, he's thinking at quarter time was they were 1 goal away from probably running all over us, and I sort of disputed it a bit. I disputed it at quarter time with him, and I there was that ridiculous blocking free kick against Lonergan where the Port bloke basically jumped early, got nowhere near the ball, and Boris came through and marked it. And quickly played on, and they gave it away. It was a free kick sort of to them, and Ebert scored a goal as a result of the pass. And I sort of said, there was a couple of examples like that where it didn't go our way. We wasted 4 set shots, and I sort of disputed the fact that it was there. But his theory was that Port are a very good front-running team, and the history of Port, and when they get in front and their crowd gets going like that, they can be very hard. Very hard to beat. And so in that respect, I thought we went about it the way we went about it in the second quarter. I personally enjoyed. We slowed their momentum and run in the first sort of 5 or 10 minutes. Just they couldn't score, and then we sort of took charge and control and ended up a bit of old school Geelong. We kicked a bunch of a burst of goals, and then from what you guys mentioned, how they sort of dropped their bundle a bit and dropped their heads from there. But I thought it was a good win just from the fact of, and as you mentioned yesterday, to be 4 goals down in that environment, as much as Port are struggling at the moment, there's probably going to be a few teams, if they did that too, that they could, have their way with. They could break them and get away with it. So for us to fight our way back and then end up comfortable winners was a really good result, I think.
Yeah.
And then it probably leads to this discussion of where we are, where we're really at as we go into the season. So we're 4-1. If you give us that at the start of the year, no one's going to knock it back. We all take it. But what does it actually mean? Where are we? Where do we actually sit in the grand scheme of things? I mean, we can only play who we're drawn to play, but at the point that still means we lost the GWS, who are 6th, we beat 5th, we've beat 12th, we've beat 16th and 17th. So is the first 5 games an accurate reflection of where we sit, or is it a bit inflated by who we've played against? Jester, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it could be inflated by who we played against, but on the other hand, we beat Hawthorn pretty convincingly, and I guess a lot of the supporter dissatisfaction, certainly on the board, has been that we didn't, we didn't really pants Essendon and Brisbane, which suggests sort of almost counterintuitively that we haven't been flattered by the opposition. I think, as I said, I think particularly in like the Port win, as you guys said, showed a lot of character, but maybe Port just aren't that good. There's a lot of room for improvement. But, you think there's still some structural issues to be worked out. You think there's some key players to find form, and I guess that was another really good thing about the weekend was Menzel sort of kicking straight and looking a bit more fluid and confident in his game. So I think I get the impression it might be a little bit like last year, but where we're going to have some good wins, but some sort of disappointing losses. We lose games we feel we should have won, but I think we'll probably make the finals this year. So, yeah, 4-1, maybe a bit of an inflated record based on who we've played, but the next month will tell the real story, I guess.
SJ?
And actually, sorry, can I just cut in? SJ, the squiggle, you would understand this. The squiggle suggests to my untrained eyes that we're sort of a bottom half of the 8 team. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, for people who may not know this, there's a thread on the main board, BigFooty. There's also a website, if you Google it, Max Barry, the squiggle. Basically, it's a way that this guy is plotting sort of attack versus defence, for example. So, right now, Adelaide is shooting off the attack front. However, they're sort of poorly rated in defence. Geelong is the other way around, which I think is interesting in itself. We've actually conceded very few scores this year. I think we're ranked number 2 in defence in terms of points conceded. And I think that sort of in some ways plays into the way we're playing because we're not exactly kicking big scores either. I think we kicked a lot of goals, in the second half against Port, but really, even considering the fact we played 3 bottom teams, we haven't really won by blowing a team away. We've more won by completely restricting a team and sort of kicking the pass score. And I think that's because we're really playing we've got a good press going. So we're really winning the ball out of the centre, which, just touching back onto the Port Adelaide game, I thought that's where we really turned it around. I thought our centre clearance work after quarter time was excellent. Stanley mostly, and to a lesser extent Smith, to Selwood and Dangerfield, really it meant pretty much most times after quarter time the ball was out of the centre going to Geelong's 50 first, and then we'll basically have to trap it in there, and after some time, kick a goal. And I think that's what we're doing this year. But the downside of that is because you push right up, it means the opposition pushes right up in defence as well, and it's hard to score. And I think because we don't really have a really potent forward line, and it's still probably got the slow, powerful but not agile part to it that we've seen in recent years. We've struggled to actually create good shots to some extent, and we don't have the nippy mediums and smalls that many other top teams do. But on the flip side, teams are actually really struggling to get down the other end and kick goals against us. And I think we've only conceded 5 goals for the year in the last quarter, which is nothing when you think about 5 games. We're only conceding a goal a game in the last quarter. So, it's interesting that from that point of view, I don't know if that's the tactic when other teams like Adelaide and North Melbourne and the Dogs, they seem to be following Hawthorn's trend of, well, let's kick big scores. Let's move the ball quickly. Let's try and get it over the top and get it into sort of medium, small players' hands and kick goals. Geelong doesn't seem to be doing that. Geelong seems to be following the West Coast, maybe Sydney trend of, let's get it in there, lock it in there. We won't concede, and eventually we'll kick one, which I think can work. I would like to see some more agile, potent, smaller players step up, though. And I thought Lang and Gregson and McCarthy were really good in round 1. And McCarthy's been pretty good this year, actually. But those 3, I think, are pretty crucial when you've really got Hawkins and Menzel maybe as your 2 actual goal kickers. I think those 3 are crucial, not only to provide defensive pressure, but also just that extra element of forward line capability, which we really haven't had in the past few years. We've been quite one-dimensional in the forward line in recent years, I think.
Absolutely, we've been one-dimensional. Do you see Cockatoo in that mix of players as well?
Well, I think eventually he will have to be in that mix, but at the moment, he played pretty well on Saturday night. I thought that was probably one of his better games for a while.
I mean, he was pretty average against Brisbane, and I say
he was shocking
average,
against
he
Brisbane.
was shocking against Brisbane. But I sort of thought, after Brisbane, I knew they wouldn't drop him after 1 week, and I'm glad they haven't, because I can see why they want him in there, because of his tackling and his aggression to tackle and chase. I think started to come out more. He had a lot of tackles against Essendon, and he's running down blokes as well, and he's the type of player that can really turn half a chance into us winning the ball back. So I don't know if that sort of fits in with our press and pressure in the forward line. And because McCarthy and Gregson are the same.
Yep. I think Cockatoo, just by the by, is an interesting one, because he is quite a tall player for that quick ball user. I don't know what height he is, but he seems to be quite a tall, explosive player, which in the end, I reckon he's going to run through the midfield when he really develops and grows into his frame. But he does seem to. I remember when he first started last year, and in a couple of NAB games, he was pretty confident. As soon as he got the ball, away he went, and he was taking his 1 kick per game, but he was kicking goals. But he seems to have lost a little bit of confidence with goal kicking, and I'm not sure if that's a technique issue, but I'm not really confident with him kicking for goal at the moment. Which obviously, when you're not getting many kicks and you're playing the forward line, is pretty crucial.
I was very relieved to see him actually get a set shot on the weekend and kick it straight, though. That I'm hoping that the ability's there and the talent's there, and it is a confidence thing, and that it started to get into his head a bit, that he's with his set shots, and that getting one at a reasonable time when we're starting to press on the weekend does him the world of good. Jester, what's your take on the style we're playing and how we are, what we're trying to do?
Well, I was actually going to ask you a question, mate. On the subject of confidence, set shots, and the forward line, what did you make of Shane Kirsten's game on the weekend? Because I know you're not his biggest fan, and I'm pretty sceptical of him too. But I thought he played all right.
I didn't mind Kirsten's game on the weekend. I've been obviously a pretty harsh critic of him, and it's been more because I suppose it's more because we like the idea and the potential of what he can do, but he hasn't actually done much of any of it since he's got in the team. And I'd probably also say he's got a lot of games based on not a lot of output, or visible, output as in terms of disposals and goals and things like that. And when he's in the team as a forward, to have however many games it was, SJ, you'll be able to tell me, was it 6 games or 10 games?
Well, he was on the brink. He was on the brink of his 6th.
Yeah, so
going goalless.
Half a dozen games.
When I was sitting in the stands at Kinnear Park, entering the final quarter, and then all of a sudden he had 5 shots in about 3 minutes.
Dominated.
Which I thought was hilarious, yeah. All of them from free kicks, it felt like.
Yeah, so
some pretty dubious free kicks too.
Yeah, but sometimes, you never know, sometimes something like that might be all it takes to give him a bit of confidence and get him going. But on the weekend, I thought he appeared to be working hard. He put on a lot of good pressure. He seems to be trying hard. I think it was probably, I was happy with his performance on the weekend. That's probably the best way to answer it, or happy with his performance and what he's building, hopefully. He's a frustrating one, though. I think 2 weeks ago, or the last podcast we did, pretty much we were universally calling for his head. So I'm still not 100% sold, but I'm willing to have a bit more patience, I suppose, based on the weekend at least. SJ, what's your take on the...
Well, I mean, I wanted him out of the side a couple of weeks ago just so he could get a kick because I didn't think it was doing anyone any good of him running around week after week after week, getting 2 handballs and a kick on the full. He wasn't getting anything out of it. The Cats weren't getting anything out of it. And I just thought, well, this guy does have talent, so at least why don't we get the ball into his hands a bit and put him in the reserves? But in saying that, he has had a few kicks in the last couple of weeks now. I think that the problem was, for me, is that I'm not sure if he can play as a proper tall forward because, to me, really, most of the time when he's in a marking contest with at least a proper tall defender, he can't win it. Although I think he did take a good mark against Port on the weekend. And the other thing was then when he hits the ground, he wasn't really doing a lot. And then I thought, well, maybe he can sort of push up to half forward, play a lead-up type role because apparently he's quite quick, but he wasn't doing that either. So where do we actually see him in the end fitting in? Is he going to play a centre-half forward? Is he going to play a lead-up, turn around, move the ball on quickly? What actually will be his go? Because although I think he does have tricks, we haven't really seen many of them, and I'm not sure which ones he can rely on going forward.
He could get the impression from watching him that he plays smaller than his height that he's listed at, I reckon, and it sort of puts him in that awkward position where, I mean, you can look at his, some people love to look at height and weight and stuff, but if they don't play like it, there's not, him and Murdoch are a similar height, but you wouldn't, they're completely different types of players, and you sort of want him to be. I think we like the idea that he could play at centre half forward, but I just don't think that's the type of player that he is, and that if he plays anywhere, it is a half forward, but he has to be, or like that third tall forward. But then we've got Menzel, who's playing better than him, who is probably an ideal third tall forward because he's certainly not. You don't want him playing at centre half forward. Or do we just dismiss the notion of the old school centre half forward completely, and it's all about just if they're forwards or midfielders at the moment, and
which is what I think you can do, and I think Hawthorn does that. But your Bruce and Gunstons actually get the ball.
Yes.
And their tricks are that they can be in the right place to get the ball and Hawthorn can hit them. Jester, do you think Kirsten can play that role, which, is sort of in vogue, or, does he have the skill set to be that sort of player?
Well, I think that thing Willo said about how he looks great on paper, but we just haven't, we haven't seen any of that in practice is really true. And I think I said a couple of, maybe in the Brisbane game, he nearly does a lot of things. Like you're watching and you're like, oh, he nearly, if the ball had bounced the other way, he nearly would have had a goal then because he could have ran onto it, or he nearly had a contested mark, or you can see what he was trying to do there, and he nearly got himself into a great position. And you think, well, but at a certain point, that's just not good enough at senior level. And I guess, I've always sort of thought of him as a sort of lead-up style player, and because his contesting marking's not that great, but he doesn't seem to do a lot of that, and it doesn't really seem to suit our game either, where our players enjoy sort of pumping balls long into 50, which I guess is probably a bit of a legacy of having Hawkins in there for so long as that sort of contested marking target. But I guess the other thing is, Menzel on the weekend, I thought Kirsten played well on the weekend, but Menzel on the weekend, he takes grabs and he's got that creativity. He can make something out of nothing, which is like those Hawthorn players, as you said, and even someone like, I don't know, Jake Stringer is a sort of extreme example. And they've got that creativity around goals, and Kirsten just hasn't shown that at all in his career. So I guess getting back to that point SJ made earlier, like if we want a more potent forward line, the guys in there need to be able to convert the opportunities they get, and at the moment it just feels like Kirsten isn't doing that as much as he should, notwithstanding that I thought he had a decent game on the weekend.
Yeah.
I think my theory is with forwards is they've got to have tricks, and the best forwards have the most bags, the biggest bag of tricks. So, I think Hawkins has probably gone down to one trick, but it's a good one for him. It's the wrestle and mark. Like him to have a few more, but okay, that's where he can at least provide a point of difference. Menzel can take a hanger and he can run around and snap goals from pockets and these sort of things. So that's probably 2 for him. But what can Kirsten do? So where is he going to be able to beat his man? And I think he's got the capability to do it, but I'm just waiting to see it.
I think as well with Kirsten, and from what I've seen of him in the VFL, he doesn't, even when he goes back to the lower level, he doesn't he's not a commanding presence. He doesn't demand the footy. He almost at that level, he's a frustrating player because you want him to be able to, as we said, on paper, do all these. He looks like he can do all these things. But even at the lower level, he'll go a quarter without being near the footy, without touching it. And then he'll bob up and kick 2 in a minute, and a couple of them will be just, he might be running into a goal or he'll get a crumb or he'll just lead out and take a mark. But it's further questions and probably further frustrations because, I think Chris Scott referred to him as one of the most talented players on the list, didn't he, the other week? But he goes back to the 2s and he doesn't exactly demand the ball and demand the games either. So I find him a really hard player to work out and to read.
What we really need is some kind of creative sort of medium-sized forward who can, is good for a goal a game but can push up in the midfield and maybe get, say, average 20 possessions over a season as well. And, creativity, few tricks, can hit up targets going inside 50 as well. Can you guys remember the last kind of player we had like that?
Yeah.
Don't mention the war.
Yeah. The colour orange comes to mind.
Yeah. Don't mention the war. The mods will get cranky.
Yeah. I mean, I can, without wanting to reopen old wounds, I thought Steve Hocking's interview on Grandstand at the end of last season signalled about as clearly as it was possible to signal that it wasn't about on-field performance, but, geez, it would have to have been a pretty big reason.
That was a very interesting interview.
Yeah, that the classic sort of politician's line of, well, stats can tell you anything. And you're like, yep.
He said something like Steve would play for anything. He's willing to play for any pay and whatever. And then he said, but we're looking to top up our depth around the middle ages. And okay, fair enough, I understand that. But then we retain 2 really old players in other parts of the ground. I couldn't quite figure that out. So I think you're right. I think there was something else behind that, and we'll just have to live with that.
Yeah, and they're not gonna. It's not going to come out anytime soon, unless it comes out in his book that they're doing. Apparently,
the inevitable book.
No, they are doing one. The Adam McNichol, who's from the Cats Media, and is writing it for him. So we'll have to wait and see, I suppose, if the truth actually comes out. Now we probably need to look forward. The next month of footy hopefully is going to give us more of an understanding of, I suppose, where we really sit in regards to the rest of the competition. Obviously, we have Gold Coast Saturday night, West Coast in Geelong, West Coast the following Saturday afternoon in Geelong, and then I think it's a Friday night game in Adelaide. And then I'm not 100% sure of the game after that, but I suppose
Collingwood at the
Collingwood at the G on a Saturday afternoon. Saturday afternoon at the MCG, bit of old school. Jester, what are your expectations for the next month? Or obviously your hopes are we have 4 wins, but what would you be liking to see in a month's time, or have seen?
Geez, it's hard. I mean, Gold Coast have looked good at times, but they still look a bit brittle. They took us apart. Not the last time we played them, but the time before that. but then I think we won comfortably last year. West Coast, as you were saying sort of before we started recording, you know, they look great in Perth, but they've looked not so great elsewhere. Adelaide, you know, look fantastic and they'll be at home. So I think I'd probably mark that one down as a loss. And then you know, you'd be pretty disappointed, not with, you know, if we didn't roll Collingwood pretty comfortably because they look hopeless. So I guess what does that leave my predictions at? 1-1, and then 2. I reckon 3-1. Despite saying I'm pessimistic about the season, I fancy a little upset against West Coast, but then I think Adelaide might do us reasonably comfortably.
In front of in front of an Adelaide Oval crowd who will be baying for Geelong blood as well.
Of course.
It'll be a very hot atmosphere that night, I'd imagine. That said, I reckon Danger's the type of player that'll thrive in it, so I'm hoping that's the case anyway. SJ.
Yeah, well, I mean, Port Adelaide, how dumb do you have to be to go and rough him up, and just, you know, poke the bear, and then he lifts and you know, plays this amazing game because one of your players decided to be a tough guy after the siren. Ridiculous. Anyway, sorry, rant over.
When they went after the two that you probably would least want to fire up as well, because Selwood popped a bit off the ball as well. SJ, what are your thoughts for the next month?
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping to see a bit more consistency within games because I reckon that's where we've been pretty patchy. You know, round one we kicked 7 goals in the second and fourth quarters against Hawthorn and got smashed in the third. GWS, we were sort of, we're down 30 odd points down and came back to almost get level. Brisbane and Essendon were pretty patchy, very poor first half against Essendon. Didn't kick many more goals in the second half, but we did have a lot of the ball. And then again against Port, smashed in the first quarter, great after that. So, you know, if you're going to play like that, you're probably tempting fate because even coming up against a Collingwood or a Gold Coast, if they have one good quarter against you, you know, you better make sure you don't concede a lot of goals in that quarter. A bit like we did against Collingwood the NAB Challenge when we conceded 11 or whatever it was. So, yeah. So I mean, we haven't really played 4 quarters, and I think, you know, to have any chance of beating the top teams, you have to be at least pretty consistent across the 4. But even against the bottom teams, it's something we should strive for. And it reminds me of the Collingwood game end of last year. We had to win to make finals, and they kicked 7 goals against us in the first quarter, and you know that was the game over. So I think we've got a bit of a, you know, there's a bit of a soft spot there for Geelong that we don't seem to play 4 quarters in a game. But I think if our best is good enough to knock over most teams, but it's about maintaining that consistency across the 120 minutes. I
think we touched on it probably before we started the recording as well, but about how even the comp is this year, and you don't have to be, you don't have to be off by much, and a team that should be worse or should be lower than you can roll you. So that sort of further adds to the intrigue and sort of the questions to be asked about where we're sitting. We should win Saturday night. Gold Coast are without their 2 big key defenders. I saw today that Riscatelli, who towed us up last time we played him, even though we won, he's not playing, and Prestia, who's a good player, isn't playing as well. So
they've got a lot of outs.
They're pretty undermanned, and Gazza had the shit kicked out of him last week, and so he would be sore. So, and I think he's just sort of shown that he's human the last 2 years anyway. So we should beat them Saturday night. The West Coast game is a bit concerning, but at the same time they've shown some average form out of WA. So you just don't know what to expect, but definitely on talent they've got a dangerous team that could cause us a heck of a lot of problems. The Adelaide game, I'd be probably penciling that in as a loss. That'll be as I said, it'll be a hostile crowd. It'll be Adelaide are playing really good footy at the minute as well. So aside from any crowd lifting,
Adelaide's conceding goals too easily, though, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's why they lost on Friday night. They played the better football, but if you're going to concede, 110 points a week on average, or whatever they are conceding, you're going to lose games when you probably should win. And I think they've probably got the balance slightly wrong. They just open themselves right up, going end to end, which I think is great to watch. But the minute they don't score, it goes right back over their head, and teams kick goals pretty easily. So, I think they're playing aggressive footy, but they're only 3-2.
Yeah.
And obviously it's going to be a really tough game away from home. But I reckon they're a very interesting team to watch for me at the moment.
I suppose it's not a Geelong focus, but their small defenders are all small defenders that love to stream up the ground and attack as well, which is probably why they get opened up the other way if they don't score, because Smith, Seedsman, Rory Laird, they all love pushing in down to the 50. So if they don't get the ball there, that you can quickly stream it up the other end, and if you can get Kyle Chaney 1-on-1 and exposed, I think you're gonna score a fair amount. You're gonna score a few goals on him, and then
the only thing is, I don't think the Cats actually play that well from end to end. I reckon we play well out of the centre, but we don't. If we've got the ball in the back line, I can't think of many passages of play this year where we've taken it from end to end and kicked the goal. Which you probably can for other teams. I think we play well when we can win out of the centre and make a fast break out of the congestion. But I'm not sure if we're the team to actually move the ball in 8 seconds up the field and create a scoring opportunity.
Yeah, particularly with Motlop in sort of such indifferent form, or not at the top of his game. The other thing about that game is their forward line is not. They've got Tex and I guess Jenkins as the key forwards, but if our problem the last few years has been we haven't been able to lock down small forwards, they've got plenty of dangerous small forwards, so that might be another challenge for this sort of rotating back line they've got going.
Yeah.
I suppose, and then, a question without notice for you guys as well then. You mentioned our rotating backline, and one of our players, or there's a couple of new players we've introduced to the side this year in that backline, in Ruggles and Henderson, and just 5 games in, how have you guys seen all of our new players that we've added to the side? Jester, I'll start with you with this one. How have you seen them all fitting in, and are you happy with them? Are they the right players that we should have gotten?
It's a long list, isn't it? That Dangerfield bloke's been all right.
He's handy.
What number
he's okay.
say again?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's got a 3 in it.
Sometimes you don't notice him sometimes, really. The thing about Dangerfield, apart from the fact he's a fantastic player, that sound another note, I guess, of pessimism, is how you realise, and I know he's sort of, like Selwood, he's a bit of a freak in this regard, but his sort of ferocity in his attack on the ball and the contest is so noticeable compared to some of our other players, which I don't think is a courage thing or anything like that. I think it's probably a confidence thing. But that does, I think, would the sort of Bomber Thompson sides, made a big deal about how they were coached to really win those contests, and is that something we're doing as well as we could? But I guess that's another can of worms. No, Dangerfield's obviously been fantastic. Smith got talked up a lot after the Hawthorn game. He's maybe tailed off a little bit since then. I was at the GWS game here in Canberra, and it was, really noticeable that against Mumford he got absolutely smashed, and they were just able to dominate in the middle when that matchup was happening. And it was only when Stanley went in against their second ruckman that we got a bit of balance back. Henderson looked pretty good, I think, in the Bombers game. Other than that, he's at times, I think, looked a bit tentative, like he's, a bit nervous and wanting to make a good impression and letting it get to him a bit. Who else? Who else have we got?
Ruggles.
Ruggles has been fantastic. How could I forget Ruggles after Dermot Brereton spent an entire game
analysing his
not
head,
not mentioning any other Geelong player, and declaring drafting conspiracies, etc., etc. No, he's been really good. I enjoyed him getting involved in the biff on the weekend as well, and I guess that was a major concern after Thurlow went down. Was, are we going to have the run out of the back line? But he's not as good as Thurlow, but he's looking pretty handy. So yeah, they've all been pretty good additions, and I guess that it's exciting that you feel like there's still room for improvement from several of them.
Yep, absolutely. SJ?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the other thing for us is we really need to click as a side. It seems to be we're just not quite gelling, although it was a pretty cohesive performance after quarter time on the weekend. But I'm not sure what it is. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it does seem to be that we just can't sort of put together a chain of disposals and end up with, a shot at goal. There seems to be, 1, 2, handball backwards, turn around, kick forward, now we got it, handball again. It just, for me, it seems like we haven't really clicked it all this year, and it would be good to see that. And I think some of those players that you talked about, like Motlop, getting involved, and I think he has improved in the last couple of weeks. It'd be good to see all those players actually gel together, considering we've brought quite a few new players into the team, and actually figure out, what does football for Geelong look like this year, and who's playing what role, and what does that look like when we're playing our best.
I'd also think what doesn't help that is we've got quite a few inexperienced blokes just in terms of league footballers in the side making their way as well. When you look at, Gregson's a second-year player. McCarthy's only played, 6 or 7 games, or maybe a dozen tops. Kolajasny's only played about 20 games. Lang's only played about 20 games. Kirsten's similar mark. There's a large chunk of the team who are still just finding their way as players, as well as trying to fit into this team, which has also now got, a large chunk of the team are a bunch of new blokes that are also trying to fit in. So I hope
that good point.
I'd hope that is impacting, how fluid we are as a team, and it's the type of thing I think you hope that it just improves as the year goes on. I'd be pretty concerned if in 10 weeks' time we're not looking better as a team than we are at the moment.
On the Super Footy podcast, our rival podcast, because we're in the same ballpark. John Anderson, who very much has his sort of
cat's hat
finger on the pulse. He said that right off the bat, I think it might even have been before we'd played a regular game. He said something like, a lot of people at Geelong actually sort of think they'll probably be better next year, just because and when he said it, I thought, don't be making excuses before the season's even started. But that's, if they're sort of thinking that way in terms of a long-term plan, and they think, they obviously want to do as well as they can this year, but next year might be the year where everyone's really settled down and some of those younger players have reached a point where they're comfortable being in the side, then we might see improvement. And hopefully see improvement over the course of the year.
It's interesting and obviously something for us to watch with interest and to hopefully look forward to. That's about all we had to talk about tonight, guys. So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for getting involved again, SJ.
Not a problem. It's been a pleasure. Happy to be on board.
And Jester, thank you again.
Thanks, mate. As I said, always a pleasure, especially to get the old team back together.
We'll have to dig Geisen up, find out where he's been hiding, and get him involved and PO.
Yes, that's right.
And I do have a bit of advertising this week, even though jokingly every week I say, does anyone have anything they want to advertise? This week, if you are going to the game, come to the pub beforehand and meet some of your fellow BigFooty posters if you're game enough to. But we'll be there from, I think, 4:30. I did have a suggestion put to me by a mate that maybe we could get there at midday, but that potentially is a little bit too early for a night game. So
now we're really turning into the Robbo podcast.
It's from 4:30ish at the Lord of the Isles, across the road, basically from the ground. If anybody would like to come, and anybody who has been before can, we'll let you know that it's just good fun just to sit around and have a beer or a water or whatever, and just talk a bit of footy with generally a group of people that are all there for the same reason. So it is good fun. I can highly recommend it. So we'll be doing that this week, and probably most home games, and probably most games in general. I think there is a meet-up thread on the board. So, as I said, I can only encourage everybody to get involved. Aside from that, that's all we have for this week. The next show will hopefully be in a fortnight or so. Just depends on how I'm going with time. But we'll look forward to speaking to everyone then. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go Cats. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk then.